It's recap time. I bring you one more movie recap. One man keeps investing in stocks and defeats Wall Street billionaires. Today, we will be explaining a film named Dumb Money from the year 2023, which explores the concept of short selling and how investors bet against a company's success. I hope you enjoy the video, so let's start. The movie is based on real-life events that took place during the COVID-19 pandemic. The movie opens on January 25, 2021, in a mansion where we meet millionaire Gabe Plotkin. Gabe Plotkin is the founder of a hedge fund company called Millionaire Capital. Hedge fund companies are basically investment companies that invest heavily in stock markets to drive off smaller investors. Gabe gets a call from his friend Steve Cohen, who is a billionaire and the CEO of another hedge fund called Point 72. Steve notifies Gabe that the GameStop stock investors are holding in their stocks, and their stock price has gone above $100. Gabe gets shocked and rushes to his home office to confirm it, and it's true. Gabe gets another call from Ken Griffin, founder of Citadel, another hedge fund with a net worth of $16 billion. Gabe panics and tells Ken to call him later. Gabe continues talking to his friend Steve, who tells him about a man known as Roaring Kitty on YouTube and as Deep Value on Reddit. Steve informs Gabe that a lot of people have invested in GameStop at the behest of Roaring Kitty because he promotes it on his YouTube channel and on Reddit. The movie now shifts back to 6 months earlier, when GameStop's stock price was $3.85. Here, we meet the protagonist of the movie, named Keith Gill, who is the YouTuber Roaring Kitty. Keith is a normal American citizen who is a financial analyst for a company called Mass Mutual. He is also a recreational YouTuber who gives financial advice to people on YouTube and Reddit. Keith meets a friend named Briggsy, who works on Wall Street, and catches up with him. Keith reveals he has invested $53,000 in GameStop shares because they are undervalued right now, and they might increase soon. Briggsy calls him crazy and thinks he's bluffing, so Keith shows him his investment on his phone. Afterward, Keith goes home to his wife, Caroline, and their newborn son. Caroline is a housewife and fully supports Keith. Keith goes to his basement and goes live on his YouTube channel. He informs his audience that he has invested in the stocks of a gaming company called GameStop. Keith mentions that he is quite bullish about this stock, while Jenny Campbell watches his live stream. Jenny is a single nurse in Pittsburgh with a net worth of $45,000 in debt and 2 children. She shares with her colleague Chris that she's watching an investment video of a reliable investor because he shares his own balance sheets and portfolios on his channel. Chris is also Jenny's best friend. Jenny follows Keith's footsteps and buys 700 shares of GameStop. On the other hand, we are introduced to another follower of Keith, named Marcos Garcia. Marcos is a young salesman at GameStop and has a net worth of $136. Marcos's boss, Brad, arrives at the shop, and Marcos asks him if he can get his pay in advance, but Brad formally declines. Moments later, Marcos watches Keith's live stream and buys some of GameStop's shares. A few days later, Keith goes live on YouTube again and updates his audience that the GameStop shares are now valued at $10. Keith hears a car pulling towards his driveway, and it's his younger brother Kevin, who delivers food and is basically a rascal. Keith runs outside to confront Kevin because Kevin stole his car for his deliveries. Kevin throws the car keys at Keith's feet and runs away. Later on, we see a party at the University of Austin, Texas. Here, we are introduced to 2 students, named Harmony and Riri, who become friends during the party. Harmony is in student debt, worth $186,000, whereas Riri is also in student debt, worth $145,000. Riri mentions to Harmony the GameStop shares she purchased last summer. She advises Harmony to purchase the shares too, because their price has doubled since. Back at Gabe's mansion, Gabe discusses GameStop on a call with his friend Steve. Steve messages Gabe some posts about people celebrating because they bought GameStop shares and makes fun of them because he thinks they are dumb. Gabe mentions that these people are retail traders, and they always lose. He also mentions that the company has had 6 new CEOs in the past 2 years, while he's short-selling 600,000 GameStop shares at the moment on his phone. Short-selling stocks basically means when a person borrows shares from a broker and immediately sells them, expecting that the share price will drop shortly after. Now news is spreading that Millionaire Capital has short-positioned on GameStop shares and started a war against the retail traders, but this time, they are not backing out either. People start talking about overcoming Millionaire Capital on social media and make memes about it. It is Christmas now, and Keith goes live on YouTube to congratulate his followers because GameStop shares are now valued at $21. He thanks them and gets sentimental about the pandemic and how his sister, Sarah, passed away too because of COVID. Back at the University of Austin, Harmony had also been investing in GameStop shares since last summer. She tells Riri that she's making $948 in profit, so Riri suggests she cash out the money, but Harmony refuses. She shares with Riri that her father was also wronged by blood-sucking Wall Street hedge funds when he was investing in shares. That's how he went bankrupt and died afterwards. Harmony mentions that retail traders boosted the price of shares, and these hedge fund companies only want to devalue the share price and steal their money. So that's why she plans to hold her shares and keep on investing, just like everyone else who is following Roaring Kitty's advice to further increase the share price. Now, we are introduced to two men, Baiju Bhatt and Vlad Tenev. These men are the co-CEOs of Robinhood, and both have a net worth of $1 billion each. Robinhood is a famous American investment app company, and many Americans invest through their app. The duo gets interviewed by a journalist who asks how their company makes money, since they don't charge any commission on their traders. Vlad reveals that when the traders buy or sell, Robinhood charges a small fee on their orders. The journalist questions if Robinhood is attached to any other major firms, so Baiju says that they are working with Citadel, owned by Ken Griffin. Vlad corrects him and says they are not attached to Ken Griffin because they are working with Citadel Securities, which is a completely separate company from Citadel. The journalist points out that even if it is separate, it is also owned by Ken Griffin, which means they are working with Ken Griffin. Later on, Keith drives with his family to visit his sister Sarah's grave. Keith's mom is Elaine Gill, and his retired father is Stephen Gill. They visit Sarah's grave and pay their respects. On the other hand, Ken Griffin plays tennis with Gabe Plotkin. After playing, Gabe discusses GameStop with Ken, mentioning that he short-positioned a lot of their shares. He mentions that GameStop is a company that sells computer items, like computer mouse, video games, etc. Gabe reveals that their revenue is facing losses, and last year they even faced $632 million worth of net losses, but their stock has been volatile and it's been up. Ken asks how their stock is increasing, so Gabe tells him it's all because retail traders are investing in it. Ken also believes retail traders are dumb, so they both laugh it off. A few days later, the news starts blowing up that GameStop stocks are increasing even more due to more retail traders. The news reports that last year a hedge fund company was short-selling GameStop shares, but now a small investor has shown interest in this stock, and they are beating the hedge fund at their own game. GameStop stock increased by 75%, and now it is valued at $65 per share. Meanwhile, we see Keith celebrating this achievement with his followers on his live stream. Afterward, Keith goes on a drive with his wife Caroline, where he gets a call from his brother Kevin, who suggests he sell his shares because Keith's net worth is now $11 million. Keith says he's still holding the shares because they are going to increase even more. Back in Pittsburgh, Jenny checks her shares, and she is in profit now, with $58,000 in profit. Her friend Chris advises her again to sell her shares before it's too late, but she also refuses, stating that Keith is now valued at $11 million, and he still is not selling his shares. In the meantime, Riri does the same thing as Keith and goes on a live stream to ask people whether she and Harmony should sell their shares or not, because they are in profit, but her followers encourage her to hold on. Later that night, Keith goes to the track for a run, while a famous Reddit user posts about GameStop and Wall Street. All the retail traders read the post, which states that the stock war is like a war between lions and hyenas. The post continues to mention that the GameStop stock has united all the retail traders, and together they will take down the Wall Street lions. Back at Gabe's mansion, Gabe's wife, Yara, asks him if he's worried about the GameStop situation. He explains that they will wait another week to see how much GameStop's stock increases, and if it increases exceedingly, a few traders will cash out, thinking it's gone high enough, and the rest will follow, and the whole thing will come crashing down. On January 25, 2021, Steve Cohen calls Gabe Plotkin to inform him that the GameStop stock has now reached $100 per share. It's the same day on which the movie started. Gabe watches the news and doesn't believe it. Meanwhile, Keith watches the news with Caroline, and he doesn't believe it either. The rest of the world watches in shock, and the news channels bombard this good news for GameStop investors. At night, Caroline asks Keith how much money they made. Keith says they made $5 million today and $4 million yesterday. Meanwhile, at Gabe's house, his wife asks the same question. She asks Gabe how much money they lost today and yesterday. Gabe reveals they lost $1 billion today and $1 billion yesterday. The next day, Gabe prepares for an online interview with a news channel. He almost starts the interview, but bails after he sees the GameStop stock still rising, which makes him more nervous. Yara enters his office and asks again how much money he lost today. Gabe writes it on a note, which says $6.8 billion in total. Yara suggests Gabe call his friends for help. He calls Steve Cohen for help. So Steve agrees to offer him money and become his investor. Gabe calls Ken as well and tells him about his loss. Gabe requests Ken if he would like to be his investor. Ken smirks and agrees to invest so they can take down the retail traders. Later on, Jenny watches the news that Citadel and Point72 have infused $3 billion into Melvin Capital to rescue them. She gets furious because no one helped her when her husband left her with 2 kids, a mortgage, a useless car, and thousands of dollars in debt. Keith visits his family with Caroline and reveals to them that his stocks have increased. Kevin interjects and reveals to them that Keith's net worth is now $23 million. Keith's parents tell him to cash out, but when Keith refuses, they all start yelling. Caroline interjects and tells all of them to have faith in Keith because he knows what he's doing. We see Marco's house, where he lives with his parents. He shows them his share of the profit and promises to buy a house for them. They too advise him to cash out his money, but he too refuses, so the price can increase more. A few days later, GameStop stocks now reach $350, so everyone starts thinking about cashing out, and the internet keeps buzzing about it. The situation makes its way to the White House. The White House addresses the matter, stating that they are assessing this short squeeze phenomenon. One night, Keith's Reddit account gets blocked from Reddit due to new Reddit policies, so Keith won't be able to share his balance sheet with his followers or update them with any advice. Meanwhile, Vlad Tenev gets a call from his employee named Norm. Norm reveals that the National Securities Clearing Corporation wants Robinhood to deposit $3 billion to clear all the traders coming in since GameStop stock is $350 per share, and thousands of people are using the Robinhood app to buy those shares. Vlad says they can't pay $3 billion because the company only raised $2 billion in its entirety. Norm reveals that if they don't pay, then they shut down Robinhood. Vlad now decides to get help from Ken Griffin. The next day, the GameStop stockholders try to purchase more stocks, but the app freezes, and it spread panic among them because Vlad had disabled the buying option to reduce incoming traders on Robinhood. Baiju calls and questions Vlad about why he turned off the buy option, so Vlad reveals he made a deal to reduce incoming traders. That way, they would only have to pay a deposit of $700 million instead of $3 billion. The news broadcasts the same story that Gabe predicted. GameStop stock price reached $483, so most people started cashing out, and now the price has dropped to $140, all because of the Robinhood situation. The news starts theorizing that Ken Griffin's involvement led Robinhood to reduce their traders, while Vlad goes on different news interviews. Vlad even does an interview with Elon Musk, who mockingly asks why he disabled the buying option, but Vlad answers vaguely to avoid his question. Now, Keith and Ken Griffin get a court letter from Congress of the United States for testifying. Later that day, Caroline informs Keith that Wall Street Bets is back online, so he can post his portfolio online. Riri and Harmony see Keith's current portfolio, and he still holds his share, so they still follow him because the buy button was also reactivated. Now, the Congress has released the date of hearing for Ken Griffin, Keith Gill, Vlad Tenev, and Gabe Plotkin, set for February 18, 2021. In the meantime, all 4 of them prepare their opening testimonies for the hearing. February 18th arrives, and everyone is set for the hearing, which they have to answer from home due to the pandemic. Ken Griffin gets questioned first. The committee member asks Ken if he has sent any texts to Robinhood, suggesting the restriction of the buy option for GameStop stocks. Ken denies it, stating it was entirely Robinhood's decision. Then, Gabe gets questioned, and the committee member asks if he tried to manipulate the stocks of GameStop. Gabe answers him, but his mic is off, so no one hears him. Vlad gets questioned about the commission Robinhood charges on their order flow, which would prove Robinhood is not a free app. Vlad doesn't answer, and he closes the hearing. It's Keith's turn, and the congresswoman informs him that he only has 5 minutes to present his opening testimony. Keith introduces himself and his background. He mentions that he was unemployed from 2010 to 2017, and that's when he got interested in stocks. The other congressman asks how he predicted all the things happening with GameStop stocks without any inside information. Keith reveals that he didn't predict it because he had better understanding and some experience with GameStop before. He highlights how hedge fund companies tried to take down this stock by using manipulative shorting strategies and brokers like Robinhood not providing timely shares, which created financial problems for a lot of people. He goes on to say that the stock market is supposed to be a fair playing field, but not anymore because big firms have such an advantage due to technology and sheer wealth that there's no hope for the little guy. Keith says there might be hope now because of him, and he is still going to hold his stock and end the conference while all his followers cheer for him and support his decision. Days later, he thinks of selling his shares and instead buys 50,000 more shares and posts his portfolio online. After the congressional hearing, Keith had doubled his shares to 100,000 shares, and due to that, the GameStop stock price tripled. Marcos's net worth is $180,000 now, so he quits his job. Harmony and Riri's net worth is almost $300,000 each. Jenny is now $13,000 in debt, and she is still holding her shares. We see real congressional hearing videos of real-life Gabe Plotkin, Ken Griffin, Vlad Tenev, and Keith Gill. It's been revealed that in 2022, Melvin Capital was shut down. 6 months after Ken Griffin's testimony, text messages were found between Citadel and Robinhood, including the suggestion of disabling the buy option. On April 16, 2021, Keith posted his last balance sheet, and he was worth $34 million. Since then, Keith has retreated from public life, but his movement has just started. Wall Street now scours the internet to be aware of any short squeezes. The movie ends here. I hope you liked the story recap. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.